Do you feel like you're barely keeping your head above water? That no matter how hard you try, meaningful progress remains out of reach? Heather gets that. She battled an eating disorder for years before seeking help. Now in recovery, Heather is here to tell you that positive change is possible even when it doesn't feel that way. Join her as she shares openly about her struggles and small triumphs. Fair warning though, Heather doesn't hold back. Her candid story may trigger some. But for those wanting honesty, hope, and healing, this is 1% Better with Heather. The information and stories shared on 1% Better are based on host Heather's personal experiences with eating disorders and mental health challenges. Heather is not a licensed doctor, therapist, dietitian, or other health professional. Her advice and opinions should not be taken as professional medical advice. Please consult your physician or a qualified health provider regarding any medical or health-related issues. 1% Better also contains descriptions of eating disorders that may be triggering for some listeners. Discretion is advised.
I'm so excited today. We have a special guest, Lauren LeDuc. Lauren LeDuc is a visionary yoga teacher, an intuitive mentor, and mama. She is compassionate, thoughtful, and deeply invested in creating opportunities for others to grow and shine. She has this most amazing book called Embodied Your Inner Goddess, a guide to a journey to radical wholeness. Highly recommend to go get it. You can get it wherever books are sold. And without further ado, here is Lauren. Hey there, my little gaffers, and welcome to 1% Better with Heather. I have a special guest today. I have Lauren LeDuc. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. I'm excited to talk to you.
Oh, yay. I'm very excited to have you here.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump right in. I'll get you to introduce yourself and tell us about you.
Yeah. So again, my name is Lauren LeDuc, and at this current point in my life, I'm almost 40 years old, and things are pretty good. I have a yoga studio, which is where I'm at right now filming. I've been a business owner for almost a decade. I'm a yoga teacher. I've led international retreats all over the world. I lead our yoga teacher training program. I'm an author, and I do like one-to-one intuitive and coaching work with folks. I'm a mama. I live in Kansas City, Missouri on a lake and have this really lovely life with my family. And it did not start that way. It is something that I've had to, I want to say, fight for in a way, and like believe that I deserve, I think. And what I've been able to do, I'll rewind a little bit, but is take the pain and difficulty from my past and really use it to serve others and to build this life I have now. So at age 17, I was diagnosed with anorexia and bulimia. And I'm sure at this point in time, like there's such a more broad spectrum of eating disorders. So I'm sure it fell under quite a few categories of eating disorders, and also anxiety and depression. And it took a good 10 plus years to really heal from that. And in that 10 years, I was spiritually seeking. I was also trying a lot of different academic pursuits and failing because I didn't have the tools that I needed really emotionally and mentally to get me to like a more stable space to even be able to receive that. And it was really this period of like trial and failure of figuring out who I am, what I believe, and how to like take care of this vessel that is me. Prior to that, I was this very high achieving student. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri, which is definitely in the Bible Belt. There are these very rigid expectations of who a woman should be, what she should look like, how she should act. And I tried really hard to fit within that. And I think at the point where like the eating disorder really spiraled, I was just really burnt out. And I was feeling really disillusioned, I think, with a lot of the things I thought were truthful and real growing up. And it was like that was shattering. And I know there are so many different reasons for eating disorders, but I think really clinging to a sense of control and autonomy when everything just feels chaotic around me was absolutely how I was responding to that. So yeah, it's interesting. I really see this spiral or this burnout as such an important part of my journey in my life. I absolutely wouldn't be where I am today without it. I needed to go into the dark, I think, to really like find my light. And I'll say beyond that, because it's easy to talk in terms of like dark and light, but to like love all of the dark parts of myself too. So that's a little bit of my story. I don't know if I've jumped around in particularly that way before, but I do see my life in like these kind of three parts.
Yeah, I totally resonate with that. I feel like there's many books of Heather. And what was that like though, growing up in a Bible Belt community or a very religious household? What did your parents say about your eating disorder? Was it pray it away? Was it like, were you sick? How did they try to help you through that?
Yeah, I would say that I was very lucky that they were, once they really understood what was happening, they put me into like an inpatient hospital program. So they did believe in the like therapy and the medical interventions and all of that. I know some families aren't, and they say pray it away. I would say like they wanted to pray in addition, right, to everything else. But I think it just felt so beyond their pay grade, you know, to deal with something like that. It's so confusing and difficult for the family. So I was lucky for that. I definitely was surrounded by more families who were more like, you know, anti-medical. And my parents always kind of allowed me to be exposed to more things, which I don't know if that was intentional or not, but it definitely, you know, opened my eyes to different ways of life for different people, and seeing that the way that I grew up wasn't how everybody lives, and that there are many, many different ways to believe. As there are people, really. So I was really blessed for the support of my family, although they didn't understand. And that treatment was not only kind of opening up the door to find out what was going on with me, it included family therapy. So it was really hard for my whole family, but extremely necessary to figure out how the way we were doing things wasn't always the way to go, or wasn't always positive. And as far as like religiously, you know, I don't think that my mom's a little more open-minded now. My dad's not. I don't think the therapy or anything caused them to like change their faith or anything like that. But it was an invitation to really look at our family dynamics and see kind of what areas were more toxic. And I think it's really hard. A lot of people struggle with this as a teenager, and the parents, you know, if they're involved, they only have a couple of years maybe to intervene, because at a certain point you become an adult and they can't put you into treatment anymore unless you're willing, right? So I think it's hard. And then having teenagers has got to be so hard too. And yeah, it was such a difficult time for my whole family, I think, but so necessary. Yeah. Thanks for asking that.
Yeah, no, it is. Thank you for being open about it. It is very difficult. I will say, for my recovery, I went through a lot of spiritual awakenings, I should say. Mm-hmm. I take a little bit from everywhere, because I really do think that you need to have some sort of faith to get you through the dark. You were walking through the pits of hell, and you need strength from somewhere. So, you know, even if you take a little bit from something, you know, you need something to believe in.
Yeah, for me, I looked in a lot of different places. Christianity and evangelical Christianity wasn't really making sense or lining up for me anymore, which was really difficult for my parents to hear. So I started looking, right? I looked at Gnostic Christianity, which is like very early Christianity, and it opened my eyes to like all of the Eastern practices, or not all of them, but like Buddhism. And I just kept looking and looking, and I opened myself up in different ways, some responsible and some not as responsible, I would say. Like, experimenting with psychedelics was definitely a part of like my spiritual process as a late teen and early 20s person. But eventually, through all this seeking, what I really found was yoga. And that was actually introduced to me in the hospital. So that wasn't, there was yoga maybe around Kansas City when I was a kid, but it wasn't something I was aware of. And it certainly isn't like it is today as far as its pervasiveness and its acceptance within the culture as well. But one of the nurses at the hospital was a yoga teacher, and she offered a class. And I was a dancer. And we weren't allowed to exercise. Yeah, exactly. We could do slow walks around this little hospital track.
Yeah.
And I think we were allowed to lift up to 5 pounds or just something right. Like that. So I said yes to the class because I was like, okay, maybe we'll get to
get me out of this bed.
Yeah, because I was going crazy. I was used to. I get it as part of the treatment, but I know for me, for my mental health now, like movement is absolutely essential. I need to be like moving my body every day, and getting those endorphins and such. But yeah, I went to the class to stretch essentially, and what I received was totally different than what I thought I was going to, which was peace. Peace for the first time in a long time. It was dark. It was quiet, soft music. There were candles. We didn't do a lot of movement, but I got to just be alone with my thoughts and my breath. Nobody was asking anything of me. I wasn't being asked to go deep into trauma, nothing like that. And I just felt better than I had felt in a long time. And that was just like a spark into my future, a look into my future, I think, for the next few years. Again, different times, like I couldn't just go on YouTube and find a yoga class. I couldn't just walk down the street and find a yoga studio. Not that I would have been able to afford it like in my younger years. But I had a couple of VHS tapes and I would do them pretty often. And I did that for years until I was able to get into regular classes. And once I was able to get into regular classes with community, with teachers, and learning the profound lessons beyond the physical, that really took my healing to a different level quickly, actually. And I'm not saying that yoga is the solution for eating disorders, but I think it's such a huge helper and tool, really starting the path to self-love and self-realization.
So I'm shocked there was a yoga class in inpatient. I don't think they do that now. So you're very lucky. You're very blessed. You're obviously meant to be on this path. I totally believe in that kind of stuff. So with your anxiety and depression, and you're in the hospital, I was in the hospital. I understand that. I wish they would have given me a yoga class. The breathing and everything. How you must have felt 1,000 times better in a second.
Yeah.
What was that like? You must have really got a lot out of your hospital visit.
I mean, for that alone, right? Because that one class really opened my eyes to yoga. And that's such a huge part of my life now and such a big part of my healing. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to really go back to the moment because that part of my life is a little fuzzy for me. I remember inpatient and certain details about it, but really the few years where my eating disorder was really bad, my memories are so all over the place.
No, they're gone.
Yeah. So I do remember feeling a profound sense of peace. And I did have a couple of other outlets in my life at the time that provided some peace. Like I was a dancer, but that's where it was, a double-edged sword, right? Where I found a sense of like release and peace and community with that. And then there's the mirrors and the pressure.
And sorry, as a dancer, eating disorders are rampant,
yeah.
right? Not in all dance studios, but
yeah, it wasn't as much in the studio where I grew up. My first foray at college, I went right into a dance conservatory, and it was definitely very all over the place there. So it made it very difficult to focus on my healing when I got to college. But my other outlet was choir. I was a classically trained singer, and being like in a group singing together, not just for like the vibration in the music, but the breath was very peaceful. So I was used to like that feeling of breathing before then, and of the peace that it could bring, although I wouldn't have like really put that together at the time of why it was happening. But in yoga, I was able to breathe and find just this place where it didn't matter what anyone else thought. There was no like judging of what I was putting out there. It was just like, I get to just be myself here, and nobody is going to tell me what to do, really. Or, I mean, they might give instruction, but, I'm not getting feedback like, oh, you're not doing that good enough, or this or that. It wasn't about that. It was simply about the experience itself of breathing, of meditation and focus. And yeah, it felt really freeing, especially as a high achieving teenager. Like nothing feels free, I think, when you're a high achieving teenager. That's why a lot of us rebel.
So in yoga, because most of us with eating disorders have anxiety and depression and OCD and everything else under the sun, right? We can't just have one thing. We got them all. How can you maybe explain the importance of how it is to be still and sit, as I say, like in the muck with your thoughts and your feelings? Because I imagine like when I'm sitting still, everything like floods at you, right? How did you deal with all that to keep a serene way of going and not take it down the tubes again?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I'll rewind and say that back when I first started receiving treatment for this eating disorder, I thought I was a total freak. Like I didn't know that a lot of the experiences that I was having were more or less universal. Like, not saying that anxiety and depression or OCD are universal necessarily, but we all have so much crap going through our brains all the time. That is part of the human condition. So fast forwarding, like really learning about yoga and going into the philosophy of yoga, there are texts that are thousands of years old that talk about the human condition and then basically like prescribe a remedy for it. So the very first thing in the Yoga Sutras, which is a text that many of us study and use, says that yoga is, there are a lot of different interpretations of it, but essentially it's being able to realize that you're not your thoughts. So it's the realization of like, yes, I have a lot of thoughts and impressions and feelings, but they're not who I am. So knowing that when you're sitting with yourself and all of the crap starts coming up, it's not about removing it. And it's not about going into it either. It's the ability to like sit back and observe it. Kind of like, it's not easy to do at first. It takes a lot of practice, but it's about like kind of going back into what we call the observer. It's like, okay, I'm not the thoughts. I'm the one who's observing the thoughts. So it creates this separation. And when you create the separation and you bring yourself into the seat of the observer, a couple things happen. And again, this takes a lot of time and practice. It's not something that happens right away. It's really hard at first, I think. And I'll address that in a minute. But a couple things that happen is one, the realization that I'm not these thoughts. So there's kind of this emotional removal in a way. But two, and this is a huge part of my practice, I can now look at these thoughts, know that they're not me, and be compassionate toward them. And that has been like the biggest key to my journey. And once you shine that light of compassion on them, they start to change. There are other conscious ways to change your thoughts and your mind, but really like being able to separate yourself from them is really important, because a lot of them are lies. A lot of them really, especially when it comes to like the ED thoughts, they don't come from us. We weren't born with these thoughts. They come from sources outside of us. And when we're able to see that, it takes away their power. Like, I wasn't born thinking that my thighs look a certain way. Like, I learned that from media, or maybe I learned that from my parents. That's not mine. I don't have to own that.
And that is so powerful. I call my eating disorder Slick. So Slick talks a good game, right? Coming out of that, though, like, how long, I'm not asking, like, well, I'm sort of asking you, is it a constant repetition that you have to talk? Like, I talk to myself all the time. It's a great conversation. Like, constantly, no, this is not true. No, this is not true. No, this is not true. Is it just doing that every day, like from the moment you wake up to the moment your head hits the pillow?
I mean, that sounds really exhausting.
Right?
Yeah, I think that in a way, but what I wanted to get to is that, and yoga has helped so much with this, we cannot be in our mind all the time. It is exhausting. It is so hard. We have to address the body. And for me, that dual approach of really connecting to the body while like doing this meditation practice of observing the mind, and then you connect the two with breath, is really, I think, what took my healing to another level. So I'll share a story, and then kind of how I use my yoga, I think, to be in this more embodied space where I'm more connected with my physicality. So kind of around the time I was able to start doing a lot more yoga, I was, I think I was about 26, 27. I also tried a new therapy called neurotherapy, which I think has different names, and it's probably more common now, but they hook your brain up to electrodes, and it took like 30 sessions where they're really looking at where my brain waves are. And the first time I got hooked up, the nurse asked me how I was feeling, and I said, about normal. I was a little nervous because it was something new, but about normal. And she was like, look at your brainwaves. And she showed them to me. And essentially, the data showed that I was in my sympathetic nervous system. Like, I was in a state of fight or flight, just normal. Like, that was normal to me. And that was really eye-opening, because I'm like, oh my God, that's my normal. And what I've learned too is so many of us, that's our normal. That's our baseline. You don't have to have a diagnosed mental illness. You can just have high stress, right? And many of us have high stress, and it's going to cause this state. A lot of times it's also caused by past trauma. So our body's in this state to keep us safe, or what it thinks will keep us safe. So I've really dove in the last decade or so to like, why does yoga work to address this? How does it get me out of this state? And so much of it is about connecting with the body. So to me, sitting in meditation could be torture, for somebody who is really deep into the illness, or into the ED, or their voice has taken over, right? Slick has taken over. But when we go into like a yoga class, especially a trauma-informed yoga class, and we're breathing deeply, we're slowing our heart rate, right? So we're doing that. And then we are, it sounds so simple, but like just by mentally taking note of where your body is in space, and then taking note of the internal sensations of your body, it also takes you out of that state and into what they call like the window of tolerance. So into just a place where your nervous system feels more healthy and what should be normal. So by connecting the breath and connecting the mind to where the body is in space and to the inner sensations of the body, it automatically calms things down. And then it's a lot easier to sit because you're not in this heightened state. You're in more of, I don't want to say detached, but you're in a state where you're able to sit with your thoughts a lot easier. So it works together so well. And then that takes practice. It's not something that we can do in one day. It's something that took me years. But I will say, like, the first year or two of this really dedicated practice absolutely like changed everything for me. It was actually incredible. And it taught me a lot of other things. Like, it taught me I can be strong. It was the first time I'd felt strong in my body. I wanted to fuel my body so that I could continue to work on like the skills that I was working on and show up to my practice. And I suddenly just felt more comfortable with myself. And I don't want to say suddenly, like it happened overnight out of nowhere. It didn't come like from an answered prayer that just like that. It was from having this thing that I really felt dedicated to and wanted to keep showing up for. And I feel that way about like my daughter now. I have a 3-year-old, and it's so much bigger than me, right? Like raising a kid. And my devotion to her is accountability for showing up for myself. And I felt that way when I was practicing yoga. And one of the conscious things I had kind of intended for when I decided to become a yoga teacher was that accountability piece of like, okay, if I'm going to be passing this practice on to other people, I better be in a stable enough place. All of us are crazy, but like I better be in a stable enough place to hold that space for others. And it worked for me.
So if you don't mind, if we can just like rewind just a little bit.
Yeah, I know that was a lot.
No. Like when you were talking about you were so happy to fuel your body, I feel like that's very important, because eating food's one thing. It's, for me, after eating the food, and then all those thoughts are like, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that help you through that? Like, everyone's scared of weight gain in this, right? Like, that's, we want to recover, but please, Lord, no weight gain, which is like the point. But it's like our own worst fear. How did you deal with that then? Like,
yeah, I don't want to oversimplify things, but I do have, I guess, an epiphany that came to me. I don't remember how or when exactly, but it was like, my body is going to look and perform its best when I am treating it with love. I am not going to shame myself into the perfect body. It's not going to happen. It can't happen. If I'm doing that, nothing's ever going to be enough. So I was like, what if I am fueling my body with love? What if I am moving my body with love? What if I'm treating it like somebody that I love? Isn't it going to find like a natural homeostasis? And yeah, it has. And I'll be honest, like, there have absolutely been, I've been triggered so many times, right, in the last decade plus of this like new era of healing, I'll call it, for myself. But it never spirals into anything deep. It's something I'm able to just be like, oh, her again.
right.
And yeah, I know I feel so much better when I'm approaching myself from this place of love. And, the ethics of yoga have been such a big part of my journey too. And the very first principle of it is ahimsa, which means non-harm. So I'm like, how can I'll talk about my book maybe, but I'll outline a lot of this in my book. And I have a section on integrity. And, there was a point in my life where, before I knew even about this as a principle in yoga, that non-harm was important to me. I'm like, okay, I'm vegan. I'm giving food to the homeless. I'm trying to be kind to everybody that's around me, but I'm being the biggest bitch to myself
Oh,
all
go
the
ahead.
time. Yeah.
You can swear away around over
Okay,
here.
thank you. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I got a mouth like an Osborne.
Okay.
Go
All
ahead.
right. Yeah. Just being a total like asshole bitch to myself all the time. That's not living in integrity. I am not living my principles if I am turning that around on myself. And it's not enough to just know that, right? Like we have to do a lot of work around it too. But I just remember like that for some reason, that epiphany of like, oh, if I treat my body with love, it's going to look great. Cause like a loved body is it just is going to look great. Like everything that is treated with love appears and feels better. Right.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. And it's hard because like, yes, we get attached to these numbers on a scale. But I know also like for me at a certain point, being able to do a headstand or like being able to balance on my arms became a lot more important than a number on the scale. And I knew that I had to be strong to do that. So I think that my desire to feel good and to feel strong and to feel joy in my body eventually outweighed this desire to have a specific number on the scale. But again, it rears its ugly head every once in a while. But I just have the tools to manage it a lot better now because I've had so much practice.
And what I love about all this, when you're talking about the breathing, I don't think a lot of people understand too, when you are in fight, flight, all the above, all the time, and you're panicking when you're eating, that's not helping your body. Like everyone's worried about their belly bloat and everything. Everything's going right there. Like you're just making it 1,000 times worse.
Yeah, having the heightened like cortisol levels obviously is going to be counter to what you're wanting or desiring. So yeah, proper breathing, like strong core, like those are all things that are going to give you a really functional body. And when I was in the depths of my eating disorder for many years, my world felt really small. It does that. It has a way of doing that. We can like kind of put blinders on and really focus on like how many calories am I eating a day and how am I feeling right now? And we're so, not to like call people with EDs self-absorbed, but it is this sort of like, obsession.
Well, yeah, your addiction wants you alone. So therefore, leave me alone.
Absolutely. When I started healing, my world opened up in so many ways. For instance, I had never traveled outside of the US before. And when I signed up to do my yoga teacher training, I signed up to do it in Costa Rica. Yeah. And it was intense. It was like 3.5 weeks of just like 12 hours a day of yoga and philosophy and anatomy and just studying. And you cannot do that if you're not fueled. It just doesn't work, or it's not sustainable. Mm-hmm. Like, wouldn't it be a shame if I was in the rainforest learning yoga, learning how to teach yoga, and all I could think about was my food and my body? Like I went so many years missing out on so much because I couldn't really like look at what was around me and gain appreciation for it. And when things started changing, like, the limited view I had on my life started to shatter. Now I can say I'm a world traveler. Before then, I had never left the country, right? And I'm not saying it's all because of this healing that occurred, but it is very much, very much correlated with it. The people I've been able to connect with, the experiences I've been able to have by like totally getting out of my own way. It's miraculous in a way. And like, I can give an example of when it's not been that way, even recently. So I was in Costa Rica a couple weeks ago. I was back there 1 week of vacation with my family, my husband, my 3-year-old, and then another week at this women's retreat, camping in the mountains there. And there was a part of the first part, the beach vacation, where suddenly I was like obsessing over my body, and I'm like sitting there with my family and I'm wondering like how my stomach looks in my swimsuit and this and that. And yeah, those thoughts are going to come up. I was able to kind of pull back and be like, whoa, what is this right now? And eventually let it go and just have a good time. But if I would have gotten caught in that spiral, I would have wasted a whole vacation instead of like living my life and having fun. I'll contrast that too to the next week of being in this space, camping with like 100+ women and kids. There are no mirrors there. There was a variety of bodies and even like some nudity, stuff like that, like where people were swimming like in a river, and a lot of like dance workshops and yoga and all kinds of cool stuff. And I don't think I thought about my body once, you know?
How freeing is that?
Yeah. Yeah. It was. And I was like appreciative of everyone else. I didn't say this, but the first week, the place we were staying, there were a few like influencers there, and they were like in their bikinis taking pictures of like little waists and big butts and, you know, the whole thing. And no judgment toward that. But I realized I was like doing the comparison thing. And I was like, how interesting that like in a totally different environment, I don't even think about it at all. So that being said, I think, you know, the way I've set up my life, especially with all of the yoga and with what I have, like, I've looked at what do I want? How do I like break down what my ethics and values are and then like form a life around that, has really like removed some of the conditions I think that create those obsessive thoughts, you know, but it's taken a lot of time.
Yeah, that I love that you said get out of your own damn way, because like we are our own worst enemy. And so I love that you said that. And it's when you get all these blessings, it's when we're in our ed, it is a domino effect, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's totally negative. When you step out of your own damn way, now one door opens, another door opens, another door opens. Like, do you find that, like, how is this happening? Law of attraction, I guess, right? But it's something to experience.
Yeah. Yeah. The first part of my book, I do like, I forgot what I call it, like a little initiation. So it's before we really get into the chapters, but it is really this call of like, show up for yourself. You deserve to show up for yourself every single day. And when I say that, it doesn't mean to show up as a specific version of yourself. It's like show up as you every single day because you deserve it. And that's not something I was able to do for myself for a long time. I would have rather hidden away. And life is so much more rich when we don't do that.
I always say it's like sitting on the sidelines. You're in the game, sort of. You're there, but you're not playing the game. Mm-hmm. When Dorothy leaves Kansas and goes to Oz, you went from black and white to color. Color is a beautiful thing to have.
Yeah.
And experience all of what life has to give us. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about your book, Embody Your Inner Goddess. How do we become goddesses?
Well, you already are. That's the good news.
Oh, yay.
So it's really just, it's a process of realization. And honestly, a lot of it is about unlearning the things that we've learned in this life and getting back to who we truly are. So this book is for anyone struggling. It's not specifically for people with eating disorders, although like you certainly could use it as a tool. And it's kind of all the mess of my life like put together in these neat little lessons. So I use the chakra system to create kind of this daily coursework for the book. The chakras, learning about those, I won't go too deep into it, but they were also a different way that I was able to connect and heal with my body, because what I learned through yoga was that my body is so much more than the physical. It's like everything that makes up who I am. And if I want a rich life, the body's at the root, like the physical body is kind of part of the foundation of who we are. If that's not right, you can't really build like a rich and complex and beautiful life on top of it. It's just, you get stuck. Mm-hmm. So we start at the root and go up. So the root's your foundation. It's your physical body, your movement, your inner child. It's your home. It's your relationship with money. It's all of the like material stuff that's really important, right? Where if we're not rooted, we can't really grow. So the book is divided into these chakras. We start at the lowest, most dense, the hardest, I think. Like the first day is called I Love My Body. So if that's triggering for you, just know like, you know, we're going there. We're going mm-hmm. right into what I think is most important to like build a spiritual life. And then we kind of travel up this system every day. So there's 49 days, 7 weeks. I share a reading, and the reading is usually like lessons or stories from my own life woven in with philosophy and with, I guess, I don't want to say like good vibes only messages. It's not inspiring in that way. It's in a very real way of like, this is what I believed. This is what many people believe. This is the truth. And this is how we like bridge that gap. So we have the reading and then reflection. So like journaling questions. Journaling, totally something I like learned in inpatient treatment for sure. And then an embodiment practice. So that's actually an action item you can do every day to drive the lesson home, because it's nothing if we don't like feel it in our physicality. And that might look like a yoga pose, or it might look like a meditation. It might look like texting a friend. There's a lot of different ways that we explore like how to embody this. So as we kind of go through all these days and different aspects of self, we get to like really love on ourselves and kind of feel into all these different aspects of what makes us who we are. And what I'd call like being fully expressed is like just being aware and loving to all these things, even the things we don't like about ourselves necessarily, and like living more unapologetically from that space. To me, that's embodying your inner goddess. It's living an embodied and soulful life.
That sounds amazing, and I wish I lived closer to you. It's kind of a drive from Canada. So where do we get this book?
So you can order it like wherever books are sold. You can get it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It might not be like at your library or local bookstore. If it's not, you can ask them to order it. Otherwise, if you feel comfortable going through the big guys, you can get it through them.
And what happens? Do you do coaching with people one-on-ones?
So right now I run my yoga studio and lead our yoga teacher training. I have a podcast called Your Spiritual Besties with my best friend Rashida, and we cover all kinds of topics in it. And then I don't know when this is going to air, but I have something new coming out, which is kind of a container for all of the fun, like feminine work that I do, which includes actually a book club for the book, because it's a lot easier to do when you're doing it with other people. Short yoga and meditation and breath practices, as well as moon circles and like group coaching. So it is something that should be born this spring. So if you go to my website, laurenleduc.com, or follow me on Instagram, I am Lauren LeDuc. You can stay in the know for all of that stuff. I do some one-on-one work. I'm just taking a little break from it right now because I have a few other projects going on. But I love working with groups of women the best. I love one-on-one work, but there's something really magical about seeing the dynamics of a healthy group of women who are supportive of each other, because I feel like people can get a lot more out of it than just working with one person in a way, because you're receiving support from so many different directions from people who are not going to judge you. They've been there. So that's something I'm really passionate about and excited to birth into the world here soon.
I always say you got to find your village and follow the guides. You are a guide. You've been there, wrote the book, literally. And how can I help? I love that. How can I help other people? How can I always say, please don't be me. Let me teach you how not to be me. Right. And it's just a sense of self and, like that's got to be very gratifying.
I think so. I think a lot of us, I don't know if we go through this so that we can help people, but it is like a beautiful result of all of this. I always say like the struggle becomes like the shit becomes the fertilizer, right? Yeah. It's what we need to be able to grow and to be able to help serve others in a really grounded and authentic way, I think. So it's nice that all of the things I've been through mean something, right? And it's nice too, to, like I said before we were going on, like I'm happy to just talk and be vulnerable about it, because I think I said this earlier, when I was 16, 17 and starting to go through this, I thought I was totally alone. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that everyone struggles. And being able to connect with others, not just through your struggles, but through all the different aspects of life, really helps us feel more connected and gives us a sense of belonging in the world, as well as like more self-worth and confidence, I think. Just knowing like, hey, I'm not in this alone.
That goes a long way. Just knowing someone else, right? Like, again, find your village. What would your one piece of advice? So now I'm all inspired to do yoga. So how does someone start? What happens? Like, I know it's a fine line for sometimes, and it's kind of a hot topic in the eating disorder world. Mm-hmm. Exercise, don't exercise. You figure it out. You. Where could one person start? Just something small, simple to introduce into their life today.
This might sound silly, but pick whatever song you're feeling right now. I don't know. It might have to like connect with whatever emotion you're feeling right now. Get away from any mirrors, any phones, crank it up and dance. Dance like an idiot. Just like
shake it off.
Exactly. And if you have like an Apple Watch or something, take it off. Like, it's not about how many calories you're burning in the moment. It's simply about expression and connecting with your body. And it's absolutely amazing the shift that 2-3 minutes can make. And I think for me, like so much of course, like this foundation of philosophy and of breath and all of that became a cornerstone of my healing. But connecting with my body in a joyful way that wasn't punishing, that wasn't judging, was absolutely key. So I know there's like exercise, don't exercise. This isn't about exercise. This is about connecting with joy in your whole body, or connecting with whatever emotion that you have. Part of EDs is like we make this firm separation, I think, between mind and body. So starting to like repair that a little bit at a time creates a sense of wholeness. And yeah, for me, that's like one of the best ways. If I'm feeling a certain type of way, I just need to like put a song on and dance like a idiot. Like I said, like just without any aesthetic in mind, just let's go. Let's move this.
I totally get that. Like just getting the jitterbugs out, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. And you can't help but be in a good mood after that, right? Mm-hmm. You gotta laugh.
Yeah.
And lower all of our internal cortisol, right? Mm-hmm. What would be your one thing you could say to somebody that they can start doing, let's say, so they get a good night's sleep? Because I know my brain doesn't turn off when I go to bed. And I know yoga does help that a lot. But is there like a mantra, so to say, that you can just say to yourself to shut off voices?
Well, I have so many, actually. So my book, every chapter is a mantra, like that's the name of it. So there are different mantras to fit different situations. So honestly, like I'll give this practice because it's not actually like word mantra. It's called Brahmari Pranayama. It just means bee breath, and it's humming. So you breathe in through your nose, and then you do a long hum with your lips sealed, like mm. It doesn't need to sound pretty. It doesn't need to be any certain tone. It just needs to be a hum. And you do that maybe 10 times, long sustained hum, and see what it does to your mind. It does a really good job of shutting it off. I don't want to say shutting it off, but letting the snow globe settle, so to speak. It is like it's one of the breaths that we use to calm the mind and nurture the body in yoga, and it's quick and effective. So I know people will say like 4-7-8 breath is a really like popular one that people use if they can't go to sleep, for instance. Like you breathe in for 4, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. But really anything with a much longer exhale than inhale is going to do the job. And the humming adds a nice layer on top of it where it shuts off the outside noise. And it kind of fills up your brain. And it vibrates through your whole body. It's subtle, but I'd say give it a try and see how it works. And to me, that's better than saying like, I love my body or I'm worthy of rest or something like that. Do I love affirmations and mantra? Yes. But I do think that there can be a disconnect there if you lack the belief behind it. So sometimes just using something a little bit more benign can be really helpful.
I'm humming my way to sleep tonight, man. The whole house is going to vibrate.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like moms have been, or dads have been holding their babies and singing lullabies forever. And there's a reason for it. It's soothing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
So one last time, where can we find you? All your social medias?
Yes, you can find me at laurenleduc.com. That kind of filters to everything that I do. And my Instagram, which is what I use most, is I am Lauren LeDuc. So LaurenLeduc. And those two things are easy ways to find me. And my podcast is called Your Spiritual Besties. So if you're someone who's kind of spiritually curious, I'd say it's a great podcast. A lot of times we really approach things from like a beginner's mind, and I teach on all kinds of topics. And I know for me, when I've had times in my life that feel lonely, especially like I had my whole other story on top of this eating disorder story, but I had my daughter in 2020 during the pandemic, and so much was going on, and being able to listen to like conversational podcasts was so healing for me in a time that felt so isolated. So we get to provide that for others. So it's like connecting with your besties on like really deep, weird topics. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I love offering that as well.
I think that's amazing. I'm going to go become one of your besties. And
yes, please.
Listen away, right? I got to get calm and I got to get centered here. So I don't know if I'll be standing on my head doing yoga anytime soon, but I know there's a direction. Like I need to rein it in.
I'm happy to provide these resources, and grateful for you and your show for making these conversations accessible, because, for anyone listening, you are not alone. So many of us have gone through this. Our culture is basically set up for us to fail, I think, and to fall into these traps of this addiction. And there is a way out. It takes time and strength and community, but there is a way out. And thank you for providing the platform to help people feel and see that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can't thank you enough. I love for you to come back again. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. We talk about your daughter and more yoga.
I'll
give you an update.
I would love that.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Heather.
That's all for this episode of 1% Better. To continue the conversation, head over to our website at www.1percentbetter.ca, where you can access more stories and resources. We'd also love it if you subscribed and left us a review on your favorite podcast platform. And remember, friends, progress takes patience, perspective, and sometimes a little help from people who get it. So be kind to yourself and others as we work to get 1% better every day. We'll see you back here next week.